Hello and welcome to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. And on today's episode, I'm speaking with Peter Zhao from Long Island, New York. He grew up in Nanjing, China, and then in Bayside Queens, New York. He works in healthcare and is a husband and father of 2 sons. Peter has Tourette Syndrome, ADHD, and OCD. He started to advocate for Tourette's after he fought back against bullies in the 7th grade and continues to advocate for Tourette Syndrome awareness and mental health every day. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's definitely my pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here and learn more about your story. So when did you get your Tourette's diagnosis and how did that come about?
My first tic came about when I was 8 years old. I was still in China at the time. I had an episode appear on another podcast, which is Tourette podcast. And the episode name was called Sticking Out My Tongue Like a Snake. So that was my first tic when I was 8 years old. I used to stick out my tongue like a snake. As a matter of fact, just by talking about it, this old tics comes back, but I also know how to put it away, Yeah. But by the time I come to the US at 11 years old, I lived in Amherst, Queens. And then after I moved to Bayside, I found out Bayside is the headquarters for Tourette Syndrome America. Oh. It's there I found out about North Shore University Hospital, which is now Northwell. And I got my diagnosis for Tourette Syndrome, ADHD, and OCD when I was 12 years old.
So was it a surprise to you or your family when you actually got your diagnosis? And how did everyone react to it?
We have no idea what's Tourette syndrome. We also had no idea what's ADHD. We had no idea what's OCD. When I was 8 years old in China, my father took me to a pediatrician, and he basically said this is called 小儿多动症. 多动症 meaning moving too much, overactivity, and 小儿 meaning pediatric. So pretty much ADD, not so much ADHD. But then the doctor also say, most likely this is just a bad habit. So this is also one of the reasons why I advocate as a Chinese American, because overall, mental health it's not it's not looked at it as so seriously in Asia. That's why we had no idea Tourette, the terminology Tourette syndrome even existed. So it was brand new to us.
Oh wow! Because you grew up first starting in China and then moved to Queens. So you had your childhood in 2 different places. Yeah, I was wondering how things were viewed. So you got diagnosed when you were actually in the United States when you got your diagnoses.
You got a lot more severe when I got to the US. And,
yeah. So what was it like growing up with Tourette syndrome, I guess, throughout your entire childhood then?
Well, it wasn't much of a bother back in China. People don't really notice it, and the frequency of me sticking out my tongue, it's not so often, so people don't really notice it. But after I came to the States, even 10 or 11, not so much increase, despite I'm in a new environment, I have to learn everything new and assimilate a new culture. But after I moved to Bayside, my father came with me. My mom came first in 1988, and then my father and I came later in 1991. But my folks, they have been fighting all their lives. So after they came to the States, they still continue to fight. So by the time I was 12, I moved to Bayside. My father has also went back to China, and also they divorced around the time I was 12. So a lot of things happened at that time. It may have caused the increase of all my tics. So by the time I was 12, I was in Bayside. I'm brand new to this country. I'm learning to speak English, learning to adapt to the culture. Meanwhile, I have all this tics on my face, tics on my body. At the time, I was really severe. I was shaking like seizure. I have coprolalia. I repeated. F-U-C-K. I doodled obscene drawings. So people just think that I'm this freaky Chinese kid, just came to America. So before I learned what's racism, all right, before anyone who tried to call me a chink, I learned something entirely different. It was other Chinese from other places, like Chinese from Taiwan, Chinese from Hong Kong. They first call me a communist pig. They first call me a mainland loser, telling me to go back to China. Right, because of the past colonialism happening in Asia, in China, how everyone is split by politics. So even though we all look alike, but there's this generational trauma and grudge from the past. I got subjected to that kind of verbal abuse in school. On top, the Tourettes. So I was the freak of the school, and everybody make fun of me, and unfortunately, teacher just they don't step in to do anything. So every time I show up in school, I have a stomach cramp, and it's all from nervous reaction. Now, of course, my tics just get a lot more severe.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly difficult to just be, in a completely new place, learning a new language, and with all these challenges, all the stresses at home, and then all the different manifestations of tics, and then having to work with not just with the students, but also teachers not really stepping in, or it sounds like really being supported. Did you get any kind of support for Tourette's, ADHD, OCD growing up, like either at home or in school or anything like that?
Well, like a lot of folks from my mom generation, they grew up through a very turbulent time. In the last century, China went from thousands of years of feudal to a Republic of China, then invasion, then changing regime. And my mom grew up through the era that including the Cultural Revolution. So she's seen a lot of crazy stuff. She got a lot of trauma. So she's hardened because there's very little support in China when it comes to mental health. So she used her sheer willpower. But my mom has like bipolar symptoms, and I never seen her tick. But she's got issues which she don't want to deal with it. She doesn't really believe in mental health, and that's why for me, as far as support for my mom, yes, she was very, very supportive, but she was more supportive in what she wanted, right? She wasn't trying to be in my shoes and trying to figure out how I'm really thinking. To her, the most important thing is to find support so they can quickly get rid of my tics, because the physical tics looks very ugly, and in Chinese, everything's about the face. So she said she feels tics lose face. It might also jeopardize my own future, like school or career. She thinks people will think I'm crazy, but that's the way she support, because she want to quickly get me back on track the way she want me to, not having any tics. But other than her, I'm very glad to get diagnosed for Dr. Shapiro, and at the time he was a very famous doctor, a pioneer in Tourette Syndrome medicine, a pioneer using generation 1 antipsychotic to treat tics. So I'm also very glad I lived in Bayside, which is the home to Tourette Syndrome Association, where I learned so much about this new condition, which I have never heard before. In the early 90s, as far as support team goes, that's all I have. My father in China, I talked to him about Tourette. Even just 2 days ago, I spoke to him about Tourette syndrome. He still tells me that he still doesn't understand. He still doesn't believe this, even though I tell him Tourette syndrome is a covered condition by the American Disability Act, but he still doesn't want to, or doesn't try to understand what this is. So that's pretty much for my support team in the early 90s when I was just diagnosed.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, and I think I may have listened to another podcast interview that you did, or it may have been one of the blogs that you wrote about your mom, is that, as you said here, she was trying to help kind of reduce the tics because that was the most visible condition. And as you described, just, showing it on the face and the importance of that in Chinese culture. But I think you had mentioned that she maybe thought the other symptoms that you were having of Tourette's could be overcome sort of by, I don't know, willpower or power of mind or something like that. So besides, the treatment for the tics, were you doing other treatments or just trying to control other symptoms?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yesterday was life changing for me. I haven't shared it on LinkedIn yet, but
Mhm.
I did share it on like Facebook and also Twitter. Yesterday, I finally got my bipolar symptoms assessed. So
Mhm.
I'm formally diagnosed for bipolar 1. I'm also, you know how bipolar have 3 type, 1, 2, and then the third. So the third type bipolar is basically when you're at the hypomania stage
Mhm.
or depression stage, you exhibit both symptoms. So at the high, I exhibit both high and low. At the low, I exhibit both high and low as well.
Oh.
So I got this type of a diagnosis, which I have long been suspecting. The antipsychotic I took at 12 years old gave me some permanent side effects, which
Mm.
was manic depression. So yesterday, I saw 2 therapists. One is going to continue and give me psychotherapy treatments. The other one is a clinician who's in charge of medicine management. Though, although I feel my bipolar symptoms came from antipsychotic medicine,
Mhm.
but I was validated the fact that I was using a generation 1 antipsychotic ORAP, which which is notorious. Well, I should say was, is an old medicine, which was notorious for the amount of side effects, also including inducing patient with more tics and on top bipolar. So even
Wow.
though I stopped taking the medicine, this condition stayed with me. So the doctor was amazed. She couldn't believe that I actually survived for nearly 25 through 30 years of misdiagnosed bipolar, or don't get diagnosed at all, or don't even know I have such a severe condition happening. I was more focused on tics. I was more focused on Tourette. I'm also aware of mental health, but 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 I have mitigated the severeness of bipolar. But now I see it. One of the reasons why I mitigated my bipolar, because I always felt mood swing is something we all have and we all can work it out, which was something my mom believed. That's why when I was 12 years old, 3 months after taking the medicine, I'm beginning to feel very weird because I would show up in school feeling good, feeling happy. And then whenever we start playing some kind of school activity, some kind of sports, when I need to make a decision, because I have to decide, my mood was beginning to collapse. And that also pulls down my self-esteem, pulls down my confidence. So then I don't want to go play the sports, yet consciously I still want to play it. So my conscience will basically tell me, go, 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 do it, do it, do it. But I don't want to go. So every day I go through this struggle. Eventually my conscience became louder, and it actually sounded like the voice of my mother
Mm.
telling me, you know what, you're such a loser, you're so stupid. Why don't you go try? You don't try, and that's why. And eventually, I was afraid to tell my mom
Yeah.
this is going on, because I know the way she look at mental health. Also, I know how much this medicine means to her. Even though the medicine control a lot of my tics, but a year after taking this, it wasn't controlling as much as the beginning. But then, almost like heroin users chasing the dragon,
Yeah.
my mother was chasing the dragon, hoping my pills will have the same effect as the first time taking it. So
Mm.
so so she insists on me to continue with this medicine because she cared a lot about tics. So that's why I never told her I was going through this. But as I grow 15, 16, I'm getting older, more mature. I fight with her more frequent. So then by then I had the guts to tell her that this medicine hasn't been working. The medicine has given me more tics. Also on top, I'm hearing voices, mom. Also I said sometimes I get very sad. I don't understand why. So
Yeah.
she basically said she thinks this is the stuff I made up just to
Mm.
piss her off, and she refused to believe it.
Mhm.
And even doctors, we want to see the doctors, and I saw pediatric neurologists, pediatric psychiatrists. None of them believe this medicine I was taking can produce psychotic effects.
Wow.
So that was what happened. So then that's why I staggered through this. I had my own coping mechanism. and for so long. Even though I stopped the medication at age 20, but the bipolar symptoms stayed with me until now. I'm almost 42 this year, and it got so severe. I thought, you know what, I need to seek treatment and get some help.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think it's got to be so challenging or frustrating to be misdiagnosed or to just have that bipolar disorder diagnosis not be official until like so much later in your life, and just, you know, all the interactions of the things that we take to treat sometimes have those side effects. And God, that's got to be such a frustrating condition. But I'm glad that you were able to get your assessment, and it sounds like finally, like, you might have some answers as far as some of the things that have been going on through your life. Wow.
Yeah, they introduced me to a new medication. It's a generation 3 antipsychotic. And of course, you know, even my wife knows that I had such horrible experience with medication in the past. And so everyone thought I will be resisting in trying to take another medicine. Believe it or not, you know, even though I popped my first pill last night before I go to sleep, but I had a horrible sleep. One of the symptoms when it comes to bipolar, doctors often ask if I have bad sleep patterns. You know, I tell them my sleep is usually pretty good. But last night after I took the pill, I woke up many times with nightmares. It's not because of the pill's interaction. It's because of my bad experience with taking medicine. So you know, before I pop it into my mouth, I'm just thinking, oh man, you know, in my younger days, you know, going clubbing, you know, with cosmetic drugs, I might just pop it without even thinking. But this stuff says antipsychotic, and I had such a bad experience as a kid. So this, I'm just thinking twice. And a blue pill, red pill, blue pill, red pill. I'm happy that I'm taking this approach, because I can't call myself anti-medication since I only took one medication for over 8 years. So, but I haven't tried anything else, you know. So I would like to have an open mindset and give it a shot.
Yeah, well, that's great that you still have that open mindset. The pharmaceuticals and the drugs have just changed so much over, you know, I'm in my mid 40s, and just, it's amazing how much things have evolved and changed with drugs. So it's great that you're open to trying new things, and I'm hoping for all the best with you, that the medication's really helpful. So since you said you took the first medication, the antipsychotic ORAP, for like about 8 years, so you stopped around when you were 20, how did you try to kind of treat or mitigate or manage through your symptoms in that time in between without drugs?
Well, I stopped medication without proper instruction from the doctors. Since my mother refused me to stop medication, so by the time I was 19, 20, I moved out. I moved in with my girlfriend at the time, and she was very supportive. And I got some off-clinic suggestions from my psychology professor. So he even said, I'm not a clinician, I shouldn't tell you anything, but you know, in my opinion, you should really wax and wane and just stop this. You know, but doctor in the past have only been telling me about wax and wane. Nobody checked my blood work, because the antipsychotic also produce heart murmurs. So I had to skip beat for many years. Even after I stopped medication, my EKG continued to show the heart murmur for 7 to 8 years until it's finally gone. And also the medicine can produce hypertension, whole bunch of different physical effects, physical side effects, which I wasn't aware of. So that's why the doctor always tell me to wax and wane, but no one say I should stop the medication and start new. So I stopped the medication on my own. Yesterday, my doctor told me that's very dangerous. She said, don't do this again in the future. But I stopped it. I had a horrible withdrawal symptom. I couldn't sleep for days. But you know what? I woke up feeling really, really refreshed. And one of the first things I did when waking up is trying to summon those voices to come back. And the voice disappeared completely. So for me at the time, I didn't quite grasp what is hypomania and what is depression. I only knew about those voices. So for me, I'd rather have tics than the voices. So the voices are gone. I'm so happy. And from then until now, I haven't taken any medication. So I just basically just try to watch my diet, exercise regularly. I definitely try to keep an open mindset, try to think positive, even though later on I realized simply having positivity and having a gratitude, it's not enough to help, especially when I'm deep in depression, and those cliche way of helping actually produce more guilt for myself, and I go further deep. But that's pretty much what I have been doing, because I always knew by telling other people about what Tourette is, so they don't assume who I'm not. And so while I can helping other people, I feel like it's a way to heal myself. And so that's helping other people and trying to be positive and exercise. So that was my main coping mechanism. And although, I didn't really advocate to so many more people on social media the way I'm doing right now, until about 4 or 5 years ago, because there was a long period of time, even though I like to advocate about Tourette, I don't want to be in a room with other people with Tourette's, because at the time I haven't got over the triggering stage. Whenever it got triggered and all the bad memory come back, so I wasn't comfortable yet. I haven't fully accepted. But then after maybe in my mid-30s, that's when I fully accepted, and I actually feel very interested. It's very nostalgic when someone triggers a tic from 10, 15 years ago. And also it's very fascinating that the tics come as a trigger, but I'm also immediately bring back my antidote, the way to stop the tic. You all come back from deep inside the subconsciousness. So it's very fascinating.
That is interesting, because I've heard that sometimes tics will come and go. Specific tics will kind of come and stay and then go.
Yeah, they wax and wane. They wax and wane. They play hide and seek inside your subconsciousness. I think they hide in places where trauma hides. And then when your trauma comes out, your old tics can also come out also. Yeah, it's very, very fascinating. I'm still learning more about myself. And yesterday, and that's the diagnosis for bipolar. It was the revelation that made my eyes even bigger. I get to see so much of those frustrating misunderstanding I endure. Now I have an answer for it. So that's why I speak up, because I encourage other people to speak out and find out more about yourself.
Yeah, that's intriguing that the different tics sort of, to paraphrase, hide in the same place that trauma does, and that they're tied together. Yeah, I don't know. The human brain is just really intriguing, the way that it works.
It is. And in many ways, the medication we take, it's not the medication that's helping us, but the medication is the key to open up the brain so your body will release those chemicals. And at the same time, it's also those chemicals your body release throw your balance off and give you those conditions in the first place. So your body and your mind are very, very, very fascinating.
Yeah. And you mentioned exercise as a way that you help manage it. What kind of exercise works for you?
Well, online these days, especially throughout the pandemic, I have been promoting hashtag 25 push-ups for Tourette's. So push-up is one of my favorite form of exercise. I like to do different variation in push-ups. So within one set, I do 5 or 6 different variations just to make my push-up more fun, also more effective. I like to do pull-ups. I'm not so much of a runner, but I like to jog, I walk, I bike. Golf is a great sport for me, even though I haven't been playing for like the last 2-3 years. With kids, golf needs time. But my younger days, golf was such a struggle because my tic was more severe. But believe it or not, once you find your passion, I was, on LinkedIn, my friend Nathan was sharing about, what type of work is suitable for ADHD. It's very true. You gotta find a job that fits your passion. Yeah. Same thing for sports. You need to find a sport that fits your passion, because for people like us, once we're passionate, we're focused. Once we focus, we forget our tics, and it all goes away. So now for the mindfulness exercise, I practice qigong. and Chinese deep breathing exercise, because breathing overall helps with tics. And there are studies talking about when brain less oxygen, you can produce more tics. That's why they have this orthodontic device for TMJ, where you bite on a device. You supposedly you open up the jaws on the side, so more air can travel into your brain. And also in the past, when I used to tic a lot, just simply by pulling my shoulder back, expanded lung, deep breathe, my tic will stop. So that's why even though it's not a cure, but it's a great way to suppress tics and have a prolonged time without tics through qigong exercise.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. Just that, anything that one is something that you're passionate about that you can focus on totally makes sense, that it can help kind of change the way that your mind works with your body. And to anything that brings awareness to your body, even if it's just opening up your breathing and getting that oxygen in. Yeah, I can totally see that. Wow, that's great. Yeah. So you've then started to talk about the advocacy that you do for Tourette's and mental health in general. And in your bio, we said it started in 7th grade when you started to fight back against some of the bullies. So would love to learn more about how you got started with advocacy.
Well, after the fight in the principal's office, obviously the principal wanted us to write a statement about what happened. And I wrote this 2-page long statement. Mind you, I was just in the United States for less than 2 years. I'm still learning to speak English. I'm looking at the other kid who grew up here. He barely wrote a paragraph, and I pushed out 2 pages. So I was really happy, really proud. Yeah. And through the writing I did about Tourette's, I felt very empowered. Despite my mom was old school in her ways that didn't help me with Tourette's, but she was also a warrior woman. She was a single mom, power executive. She was in the aeronautic industry, and she always challenges herself against all the men in the industry. And so she always felt she's better than the man out there. So she's that type of a woman. So she definitely empowered me to stand up. So she wasn't the stereotypical Asian minority, model minority, just keep it to yourself and don't do anything about it. She believed in fighting back when the adults in the room are not helping you. You got to fight back. The ideation of advocacy started in 7th grade, and I started talking about it to other students. But it was when the first semester of 8th grade started. That's when I really took myself to each new class. At the time we have homeroom, where all the kids gather before the class starts. So that's where I do my introduction. I talk about who I am, where I'm from, and most importantly, what is Tourette syndrome and what's my understanding and what I hope you can learn from it. So I took this type of advocacy throughout junior high school and high school. And by the time I was in senior year, one of my former bully came up to me, and at the time we are already friends actually. And he also said to me, "Hey, we're about to graduate, and I just want to let you know, I'm sorry for treating you like that in the past, but I have a lot of respect for what you do." And I felt really, really good when I heard that. Hence, I took the same attitude to college and also to work. So every job interview, when I know I'm acing it, I'm about to get the job, I always let the person interview me, let them know I have Tourette syndrome. And a lot of times they are shocked. They couldn't believe it, because they think I will be ticking, I will be doing all that stuff. Obviously they don't understand what's Tourette, right. But they're just very shocked that I'm so upfront about it. And even after interview stage, I'm at work. I will also number one, inform the HR, because not only is it good to educate them, but it's also good to let them know, hey, this is a Disability Act protected, right, protected condition, so you should know about it, right? And then I'll also stage a few minutes of my time during team meetings and do another formal introduction of what's Tourette who I am, so that's the advocacy for the professional world. And extracurricular wise, among social media, among all platforms, I belong to a lot of Tourette syndrome support groups on Facebook. I do text and also visual. I'm also on TikTok. Just other Tourette syndrome, like Tourette podcast. The host, he said he really enjoyed the way I advocate, because he said I'm not all serious about the academics of Tourette, but I like to advocate to show people how I incorporate Tourette syndrome and my mental health into my everyday life. And just last year, I started writing and publishing. So I have already published several as Asian journals, specifically talking about my Asian American experience growing up in America, having Tourette's and mental health.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think it's fantastic that you're comfortable being very open at work about having Tourette's, and also just a great role model for other people in the workplace, because clearly, like, you're not the only person with Tourette's in the working world. So it's just a great example for some people to see people who are open about it and talking about it and educating other people about it. So yeah, that is fantastic.
Thank you.
Talking about career, you work in healthcare. So how did you decide what kind of career you wanted to have and decide what industry to go into?
Oh, that's a really interesting thing, because when I grew up in China, my mother was the only business person in my whole family. Because of how China was in the last 100 years with all the war, how things are torn apart, things had to get back together. So people got their own placements. So my mother's choice was to get into business. My father is in the media industry. He was a TV show director back in China at the time. But because they were so busy, plus they fight all the time, so oftentimes they neglect me. So I'm always being, they dump me to the grandparents. So I grew up with my grandparents. My grandparents were both professors. They speak multiple languages. They translate books. So I grew up in this university professor environment. So I wanted to become a biologist. Even now, I don't like to read a lot of fictions, a lot of non-academic books. But until now, I still like to read textbooks. So that's a habit I developed since I was a kid. But after coming to America, things changed, and especially with Tourette syndrome, how it hit my self-esteem, my confidence. So things got really, really scrambled. Although my mom pushed me to get a working paper at age 14, to start experience working and to get an understanding of how money works. So, now I look at my Social Security history. I've been paying income tax since 14. I'm almost 42, and I should retire by now, right? So, right. But because my head was so scrambled, I once wanted to become a biologist. I once wanted to teach. I had a scholarship at SUNY Purchase for environmental science, but my mother wanted me to go to Baruch and learn business and also stay closer to her. So I listened, even though that's not what I want. So I forced myself to do what she wants. Now I realize all this forcing and swallowing unwanted things, and just pleasing people, making other people happy, it doesn't do anything good to my mental health, because these unhappy memories pushed down inside becomes the trauma that haunts me in the future. So I really wish I went with my own way. I didn't. So I went with her way to do business. I'm bad in math. I'm not good in numbers. I also understand a lot of people with ADHD, they're not really good with numbers. So I'm not exactly bad with math. Just by the time I hit calculus is my ceiling. I can't go up anymore beyond calculus. So business school demand math.
Yeah.
So I spent 3.5 years in Baruch, unable to go further because I couldn't pass pre-cal. Even pre-cal, I couldn't pass. It took 3-4 tries. So at the time, I was also going through, even though I was still on medication, I was about to be off. I was working, I was having Tourette's, I was having undiagnosed bipolar symptoms, I was depressed. At the time, the medicine, the voices was beginning to tell me to kill myself. By the time, the voice was so severe, it was loud. It was 3 or 4 different voices telling me to kill myself. So I was, unfortunately, I had to drop out of college at the time. Since I always been working, so I found myself a job, continued to work, but I think with all this going on, my head becomes so cloudy and I lost focus. So I don't really know what fits me and what's a good job. All I know was subconsciously I knew I need something that can bring out my passion, because I know once I have the passion, I'm enthusiastic. So I always thought I could do any job because I have the passion. Now I understand is that at the hypomanic stage, I have certain narcissistic traits during the hypomania stage that give me the delusion, make me think that I can hack anything because I'm a passionate, enthusiastic person. That caused me to look less about what I really want and rather just throw myself into any industry. So I did freight forwarding. I moved containers, ocean freight, air freight for 10 years. I worked through several companies, including FedEx. I did sales. I traveled to Asia. So it was a really good experience. But when the recession hit, my type of job became very difficult to survive. But that's also when Obama started Obamacare with Medicaid expansion, that opened up new insurance opportunities. So one of the insurance carrier in New York expanded their Medicaid program, and they created additional lanes. So I was introduced to community outreach for quality management. Even though I had no experience in this field, but I learned it's a people's job. It's a service job. I'm really good at servicing, astrological wise, but my rising sign is a Virgo. So I learned Virgo people are very good at servicing, and I love servicing. So that's how I went to the job interview. When I went to the job interview, I was going to do a sales call at that time. I was suit up, my briefcase. So I showed up, and when I looked everyone out, I thought, I think I might get this position. So after I spoke to the manager, I realized, hey, this is definitely a people's job. Of course, I need to learn new skill sets, but mostly it's about me connecting with the community and get the message across, similar to Tourette Syndrome advocacy.
Exactly.
So that's why I stayed, and it's been almost 10 years since I've been working there, and it's a corporate job. Corporation is not a human entity. So from time to time, with my local service mentality, I still run into conflicts with the number mentality. But I feel the job I do is able to satisfy me to create the passion I need. What really makes my day perfect is when I encounter the most nasty member with the most problematic issue, because I like to use my patience and work with this member and eventually give the member a solution. Sometimes they don't require a real solution. Sometimes they're so pissed off simply by the way of how other people didn't have the right service mindset, and they just pass them around and they don't want to take ownership. So a lot of time I want to show them how I give you the ownership that you want from me, and to show you, I'm capable, yet I'm also humble, understand what's our true capability. Simply being truthful and honest to you, and that's already great for the consumers to hear, because I'm also a consumer. A lot of time I just want to get an honest answer I'm not demanding for the sky. So sometimes over all week long, there's one call, one person. It makes me so satisfied, for next week ahead. But if you ask me right now, what I want to do, I'm still not quite sure. But I like I said, I just want to service people, help people, and to find something that fits my passion.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it just shows the importance of finding work that fits with your passion and fits with your skill set. So yours being, working with people, service, problem solving, listening, all of that, sounds like it ties in really well with what you're doing now and will help guide you in the future. So that's really great.
Yeah, my wife, she still feels that I should try real estate because she feels with my personality, especially how I'm juggling Tourette's and bipolar. She feels being able to have full control on my own, being independent, not having to answering, immediate bosses, will likely decrease the chance of having me relapse into depression. But a lot of people say I have a lot of potential to truly be an entrepreneur and do something on my own. But the traumas, especially the undiagnosed bipolar and the depression and the mood swing I go through, has been inhibiting me from moving forward and pursuing what I really want, because often I guilt trip myself and downgrade my own potentials and unable to pursue further. This is also another reason why I want to seek treatment, so I can finally feel the way I want to feel without feeling like I'm masked by a mental health condition.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Peter, thank you so much for talking about your experience and your advocacy on my show. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your advocacy and the kind of work that you do with that?
My current alias, where you can search me on all platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, it's all under the same account, Fabulously Tourette. I want to be Tourette and fabulous at the same time. So that's where you can find me. Not to mention, I'm also on Medium. So just make it easy to find me. That's why I kept my alias same throughout all platforms.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'll put links to your social media in the show notes so that people can click on it from there when they're listening to the episode. Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know, or anything that they can help or support you with?
Yeah. A lot of time when I tell people my story, some people will tell me, "Oh, Peter, I'm so sorry for what you're going through." I always tell back to that person and I say, "Hey, thank you for your support. But I don't think I'm the person you should feel sorry for, because there are more people out there who knows something's happening, but who can't say it. There are people living in other countries afraid to speak out about their mental health problem, fearing they will get blacklisted by jobs and government. There are living in America. They don't want to speak up about this because they don't want to get teased by family member for being weak. So there are a lot more people out there, and also there are people out there who have the condition, yet they don't understand. They're speaking with their mental health condition, so they're in their own denial and they don't see the danger that's up ahead. So I feel those people deserve the big sorry, you're trying to give it to me. But I'm grateful for the fact that I'm lucky enough to be able to recognize, to having the insight and awareness to help myself. But that's why I don't say sorry for my condition, because there are a lot more people out there who are not able to speak out like how I do it. That's why I will continue to feel motivated and to talk about mental health conditions and mental health matters.
Yeah, that's great. Pity is never a helpful condition, but the type of support and advocacy that you're able to do because of the situation you're in is going to help many people and help educate other people who may not know much about Tourette's and how they can help support their friends and family members as well.
Yes, you're not alone, and we all can help.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, thanks so much, Peter, again, for being on my show. It was great to talk to you today.
Likewise, pleasure to be on the show.